Hello and welcome once again to Terra, where today we're going to take a look at the newest lore of the Alpha Legion. We're taking a look at the new Ghost Legion novel by Mike Brooks, and this is all about the Pillar of Dreams, which is quite a nice sounding title, and believe it or not, this is actually a side of the Alpha Legion that's perhaps more palatable, at least to kind of our modern sensibilities, and in particular the lore around the New Alliance. So the New Alliance is kind of what it sounds like. A proposed burgeoning empire from Solomon Akurra, starting from one planet and then expanding outwards, offering a genuine alternative to the Imperium of Man. And in the novel, they talk about offering a alternative for the Imperial citizenry that basically puts the Alpha Legionnaire kind of opposite the Ultramarine. In a weird way, the Alpha Legionnaires are going to be, rather than cutting heads and infiltrating organizations, they're going to be fighting on the front lines. They're going to be establishing a genuine mini empire, and this will allow them to ultimately build up their forces and strike that death blow that they want to come against the Imperium of Man. So within their new empire, they have to try and offer things that, of course, the strict dogmatic ecclesiarchy that are so dominant within the Imperium don't. So they offer things like religious freedom, allowing them to openly worship traditional local gods, or perhaps even other darker gods, security and peace, an Alpha Legionnaire force that protects them and makes sure that they're going to be safe from Eldari pirates or whoever else might come knocking. But there'll still be a small tolerance of Xenos. You're going to be able to interact with other races in the galaxy. You're going to be able to even utilize things like little bits of abominable intelligence. Even Solomon Akurra has kind of a pet AI spider that he utilizes in the novel and the previous novel as well, and it's actually pretty important. It is a true abominable intelligence, the Diabolicus Secundus, something that he realizes is very valuable but can only be utilized under wise caution. So the Alpha Legion are coming out swinging. They're genuinely trying to offer an alternative to the Imperium of Man, and this is, of course, is not particularly popular with all of the Alpha Legion, because they don't want to be Ultramarines. They don't want to be administrators. They want to be out there and they want to be infiltrating, cutting heads. We get a fantastic plotline in the previous book where they infiltrate like the Inquisition and do all kinds of crazy stuff, and now they're just going to be minding the Imperial citizenry. But this book, as we'll talk about today, goes even further, and the ultimate plotline is based around the idea of the Alpha Legionnaire, and in particular Solomon Akurra, their Harrow Master, discovering the secret of how to literally destroy the Imperium. That's not an exaggeration. That is his summation. That is his goal, and that is exactly what he wants. And he seeks to accomplish this by utilizing something called the Pillar of Dreams. The Pillar of Dreams is basically a piece of Wraithbone, this Xenos artifact, that if a normal human being kind of connected to it, they would be driven mad. But inside of it are like souls of like dead seers, and essentially it can grant prophecies and wisdom to those who get access to it. Now, in the novel, the Alpha Legion aren't the only people who are after the Pillar of Dreams, because there is also a radical inquisitor known as Alisana Nero, who hopes to weaponize this pillar for the Imperium itself. They track the pillar to the world of Cetra. There's a big vault of the Adeptus Mechanicus, and inside of this vault exists the pillar. The Alpha Legionnaire get there, the Inquisition get there, and then the Alpha Legionnaire become massively outnumbered as a massive Imperial retribution fleet arrives in the system. And instead of doing the classic kind of Alpha Legionnaire tactics of striking and fading, Solomon Akurra decides to stand his ground and legitimize this new alliance of his, leading to an absolute meat grinder of planetary ground war. We've got the Death Corps of Krieg, the Savlark Hemdogs, the Sisters of the Order of the Ebon Chalice. Along with that, they bring Imperial assassins, and in particular, a Calidus assassin named Kynarius, who is seeking to, of course, cut the head off of the Alpha Legionnaire, tear apart their command structure. The massive twist that comes later on into the novel is that this entire invasion has basically been a huge smokescreen orchestrated by the Inquisitor to steal the Pillar of Dreams. Akurra, he breaches the Mechanicus vaults just as Nero hooks up a navigator to the machine, because Nero herself can't just utilize it because she'll be driven mad, but she hopes to utilize a navigator in order to access the prophecies and find out how to weaponize that knowledge for the Imperium of Man. The Alpha Legionnaires, they're caught up in a firefight against the Death Watch and frenzied assassins, and ultimately another psyker who has infiltrated the Inquisition, called Evelyn Drake, who is not on the side of the Alpha Legion or the Inquisition. Like, she rocks up as well, and she's been infiltrating the Inquisitors' forces all this time, and she decides that she doesn't want the forces of chaos to have it for obvious reasons, but she also doesn't like this radical Inquisitor attitude because her rival is Nero, and so she ultimately creates kind of a suicidal hellfire of psychic monstrosity which ends up obliterating the entire vault. But not before Solomon Akurra is able to get to the Pillar of Dreams, and he is able to get the information that he needs in order to bring down the Imperium of Man. We do find out that Solomon Akurra does now have all the information that he needs, apparently, to destroy the Imperium. The specific question that he asks the souls of the Eldar, I guess, is, how do I, Solomon Akurra, destroy the Imperium of Man? It's very specific. Now, because it's such a complex question and the Imperium is very complicated, he doesn't get a very simple answer. He gets a whole bunch of information that he's going to have to dwell on for a while, obviously setting up the third book in the trilogy. Games Workshop usually write trilogies, but that is where he's going. So that's basically how the book ends. So we've got Solomon Akurra, the Harrow Master. So he's reforged his Pale Spear once again. If you've read the first book, you'll be familiar. Solomon Akurra actually finds the two blades of Alfarius' weapon, the Pale Spear. That gets broken in this book, and then, well, the half does, it gets cut in half, and it gets reforged with like some Xenos weaponry, and it's now become a symbol of his authority. They create fakes and spread them throughout the Alpha Legion, so of course the Imperium won't know which one to target. But he's now got like a true staff of his authority that's been widely recognized. A huge force of Alpha Legion arrive to the world of Cetra, kind of saving the day, really. But he has now basically started his own mini empire, and he has already established the knowledge that he needs to bring down the Imperium of Man. I really didn't think this book would be as big a deal as it was. I thought that Mike Brooks was probably writing this book to kind of give like a minor Alpha Legionnaire backstory whilst they're working on larger chaos plot lines. But this is a pretty big deal. It looks like we're going to get a genuine kind of Alpha Legion corner of the galaxy, and it's probably going to be pretty small to start with, but it's going to grow. And it's been teased that Solomon Akurra may be getting a model, which is important because that tells us the character's probably going to be sticking around for a while and won't just be killed in the next book. So the question is, how will he destroy the Imperium of Man? What did he get told, and how successful will this new alliance be? You know, it's quite specific. There's going to be Xenos allies. He's got some abominable intelligence in there. He's a pretty big deal. So I really, this book's a real head scratcher. I just finished it today, so this is all pretty for me. But something I'll be thinking about quite a lot. There is always going to be a little bit of controversy with stuff like this if you're an Alpha Legion fan, and I think understandably so, because they're a different type of Alpha Legion. They're not like it's a controversy in the book between characters where not all Alpha Legionnaires want to play as Ultramarines. They want to be their own thing. They want to be infiltrating the Imperium and playing a ridiculously long game and bringing it down from within. Of course, lots do still hope that Alfarius might have survived in some way and will return one day. There's just so much to go on. But Solomon Akurra has gone the other way. He's pretty much his own man, and he doesn't believe that the Alpha Legionnaires' traditional tactics have worked very well, so he wants to do something very different. It's a really interesting direction for them to go in, and I'm pretty excited. This isn't the whole of the Alpha Legion, right? So Solomon Akurra has a massive Ghost Legion force. They call themselves the Ghost Legion more than the Alpha Legion. He has got a substantial army, and he's gathering more to his cause. But at the end of the day, if you still want to believe in the Alpha Legion hype and the idea that Alpharius has survived or Omegon has survived and they'll one day return, that's not off the cards. This is just an alternate direction for the faction to go in. And from what I know, these books have been pretty popular, so I will be interested to see how it all goes forward. I think the problem with the Alpha Legion, now I've spoken about this many times on the channel, is that if you make too grand of a claim, as the Alpha Legion do sometimes, then it's very hard to follow through on that. If you wrote a plot line that was based around the idea of Alpharius has been planning something for 10,000 years, and that's why we haven't seen him, how do you possibly deliver on that as an author that doesn't revolve in or culminate in like the death of the Emperor or the resurrection of Horus or something completely mad? It would be impossible to really land that kind of plot line. Whereas this is a big deal. We've got a genuine plot to destroy the Imperium, but I don't think it's going to be a crazy, ridiculous idea. I assume it's going to be, utilizing some kind of new technology. There's a lot of mentioning of Xenos, abominable intelligence in these novels. Solomon Akurra has a demon-infested arm, so that he's not disabused of the idea that chaos can be incredibly useful. He has a former Imperial Psyker who she serves as like his bodyguard and is ultimately able to kind of teleport him out of the room when there's this big explosion. So he definitely understands that there are so many tools at his disposal, and that I think makes him quite interesting as a character, because he's really he really is able to do anything. And there's so many ways Mike Brooks can kind of take this. Anyway, chat, hope you're doing well. James, yo Sandman, happy Sunday, hope all is well. Thank you so much. Thanks so much to everyone who supports the channel. It really means the world. Yes, I often get a lot of anxiety around doing these kind of streams, and they're a lot of fun. But when I read a book like this and I finish it, I'm like, whoa, that's a lot. I can't wait to talk about this. So this is pretty fun. I actually read this book in like 2 halves, where I read the first half and then I had a bunch of other stuff come up, and I finished it today, and I was like, huh. Ooh, that was a lot to go through quite quickly. So it's a pretty crazy turn of events. Like I said, I didn't think this would be a particularly game-changing book, but yeah, I think this is a genuine. I think you will actually see the implications of this manifesting in campaigns, in future model releases, in supplements, because we've got a genuine kind of mini Alpha Legion empire, which is pretty interesting. Can we now finally talk about how Ghost Legion was mid? So, yeah, I mean, I'll be interested to hear why you think that. I guess, like I say, that it's always going to be a particular, it's always going to be a divider. I don't think that's a surprise for anybody, because at the end of the day, the Alpha Legion are a tough thing to sell to everybody. You either do a Praetorian of Dawns type book, where you write something that is just the Alpha Legion crushing it. Everything they do, they nail. They're so on top of the Imperium. They're so 3 steps ahead that the Imperium is behind the curve, and then you can't really deliver on that without doing something like killing a primarch, killing an emperor type figure. There's just nothing you can really do. Or you do something like this, where you take something small scale, you take something where they've got like an obvious progression of their story going forward. But there's always going to be that Alpha Legion fandom that are sitting there going like, no, I think there's a bigger plot line to be had here. I don't want to read about this. I want to read about the return of Alpharius. I want to read about their 10,000 year plan. I want to read about how they're actually behind everything Abaddon's been doing. And that's fair enough. But yeah, there's always going to be, I am aware that there's always going to be a little bit of pushback against these sorts of novels, to be fair. It's not out for audiobook yet. Oh, interesting. That's odd. I thought they normally released the audiobooks on the same day, but yet no, I read the Kindle version. So that's interesting. I thought they normally did them the same day. Yeah, I wonder if there's going to be a delay. That would be interesting. I'll be interested to check. Is it out on Audible or on audio version on Games Workshop's new app? Because that might be how they're planning to sell the app, is they release things on the app first, and then like a few weeks later they release it on the Audible. But yeah, that's quite a bit of a delay. I feel like it's been out for a month now.
I too would just be modern day morality nice Marines if I was a Chaos Space Marine 40,000 years in the future. But thank God we trade with Chex Notes only hostile Xenos. Well, I will say at the end of the book we do see kind of some of the fruits of this new alliance. We do see servants of the Imperium actually deciding to side with the new Alpha Legion. Yes, they're now the commanding authority, but apparently they truly do offer some sort of alternative. And let's face it, the ecclesiarchy, I mean, they can be a bit much. They can be a bit much at times. There's no doubt. What's with the cover? So great question. It's a common misconception that all the Alpha Legion look like Alpharius. That is actually not true. And there are Alpha Legion in the novels who have surgery to look exactly like Alpharius, and there are some that just generally speaking do, because that kind of thing does happen. But you can have sons of Primarchs that look nothing like the Primarch at all. That does happen. There's many examples of it. And if you think about it, it makes for a far more interesting universe. Bring back Jagatai. Me too, brother. Alpha Legion deserve better. One of the most unique and by far potential. What you say? They do have a ridiculous amount of potential, but like, it's just, so I understand where you're coming from. I understand where you're coming from in that it has a lot. They have a lot of potential, but how do you deliver? How do you deliver? Like, what would be a plot line you'd like to see? So, for example, if we take a look at another author who's written Alpha Legion, whose name I forget, who wrote. Suro Sons of the Hydra. So, Sons of the Hydra. Rob Sanders. Okay. Rob Sanders wrote Sons of the Hydra, and in that we get a plot line based around a potential Omegon return, right? Pretty cool. A lot of Alpha Legion fans, pretty crazy for that. But if Omegon did return, that, I mean, how, like, wouldn't you be, what could he possibly put in the book that wouldn't be disappointing? Like, genuinely, I'd be really interested to hear from you guys if you have any theories. I'm sure Games Workshop would need too. Because if Omegon returned, what has he been doing for 10,000 years? Where's he been? And like, if he's been working on something, what has he accomplished? Like, you'd probably have to do something like, you know, have him have been captured for 10,000 years by the Inquisition. That could work, something like that. Like they've, you know, been using him as a servitor or something like that, and using his brainwaves to kind of formulate plans. You could do something crazy, but realistically, it's never going to land well and satisfy everybody, because 10,000 years to scheme is a long time, and yeah, that's what I worry. But if you have any genuine theories, I'd be interested to hear what you think would be what you would like to see at the very least. The first book sucked. I was just waiting for Sandman to summarize the second one. So, like it's like a lot of things. The first half of the book is definitely quite a bit slower, and then it all kind of lands pretty quickly towards the end, which is, I guess, probably why I took a break between the two. But when things start kicking off, it kind of all goes crazy. I think the problem is they introduced the idea of the Pillar of Dreams very early on, so you sort of know, it's because it's 40k as well, you sort of know everything's going to be based around the Xenos artifact, and it's a cool idea, this Pillar of Dreams, but yeah, you're just waiting for it to land, aren't you, realistically? Alpha Legion models coming soon. They will definitely get models at some point. So the Alpha Legion in 30k, of course, have a bunch of models. They have no current model in 40k, either a character or a unit. And we've just seen Red Corsairs releases, and we've just seen Iron Warriors releases. So over time, they will release models for all of the main traitor legions, and then the Red Corsairs are just an additional one. And so yeah, the Alpha Legion will definitely get that attention. As I mentioned earlier, there was a rumor engine. If you don't play the tabletop, on Warhammer Community, Games Workshop's website, every Thursday they release an article that has a rumor engine, or usually, and that rumor engine is a small picture of a model that is coming out in the future. Now, over a year ago now, I think, they released a rumor engine, and it had a picture that was clearly part of the Pale Spear, the weapon of Alpharius or Omegon. So either it's going to be an Omegon model for 30k, I would guess, or it will be Solomon Akurra for 40k. The fact that it didn't come out alongside this novel is a bit of a red flag, so potentially suggests it's not Akurra. but not impossible. And Games Workshop have all kinds of supply and logistics issues, so it might just be delayed, and things go wrong all the time. So there'll definitely be Alpharius models, Alpha Legion models in the future. The nice thing is, if you do play Alpha Legion, you could just buy 30k models, because I think that's probably one of the most interesting aspects of the Alpha Legion that people enjoy, is that a lot of them are not that they're not massive servants of chaos. So you have a lot of them that do worship the chaos gods, as a lot of legions do, but a lot of them, of course, think they're loyal to the emperor, or a lot of them view chaos at kind of an arm's length. So you can absolutely use kind of 30k models, less corrupted models, and use kit bash stuff like that, and you have a pretty cool and unique looking Alpha Legion force. So it's pretty nice. I think the really nice thing about Alpha Legion in 40k, if you were to collect it, is having little bits. So the Solomon Akurra's forces we see in the first book, there's all of these different war bands that are pulled together, and some of them are like completely the craziest faceless Alpha Legionnaires that you've ever seen. Some of them are like looking like Alpharius, and some of them are just kind of traditional Chaos Space Marines, or largely uncorrupted Space Marines that worship, still think they're serving the Emperor. And so if you want to collect an Alpha Legion force and just have one squad of each, that would be so thematic and look so good. I'm actually surprised I've never seen it before. But there's a friend of the channel called Josh, who we had on last year, and he's a big Alpha Legion fan. Omegon Edge on Instagram. So if you want to see some cool Alpha Legionnaire models, go check out his channel. He recently had a baby, so I didn't pressure him to come on this podcast. So but, I will no doubt reach out to him in the future, and we can have another chat about the Alpha Legion, because he's a diehard fan and will no doubt have a completely different spin on the faction than me. What was the book title? It's called Ghost Legion. Is the book good or not? I enjoyed it. So I really like Mike Brooks as an author. I think that, I would definitely recommend this book if you're an Alpha Legionnaire fan. And I think that the reason for that, it depends what kind of Alpha Legionnaire fan you are, though. Like, I know this sounds like I'm trying to play both sides and be political or whatever, but the truth is, there are some Alpha Legion fans that have a very specific image of what they think the Alpha Legion is, and that is totally your prerogative. But it's just, I like story, and this is the only way I see us getting a genuine Alpha Legionnaire story that lands well for me. So there are some big plot lines in play, like the Alpha Legionnaires that are left on Terra at the end of the Horus Heresy. That's a big plot line for Games Workshop to utilize in the future. I would love to see that come up in a novel. Of course, we have Death Row in the Beckwin series, but if you want to have a genuine Alpha Legionnaire push with models released and campaigns based around it, Solomon Akurra's New Alliance is pretty much the way you want to go, I think. And you can, this doesn't take away from any other Alpha Legionnaire plot lines. Like, all that would happen is when Alpharius returns, he returns, dismisses Solomon Akurra, maybe kills him, takes back the Pale Spear, who knows, and then things just carry on. But at the end of the day, this is a good thing to fill in the meantime, and we want to see all traitor legions get some lore, right? Which Alpha Legionnaire books should I start reading? So I would say, like, one of the most important books that I think you should always read is Alpharius, Head of the Hydra, which is also by Mike Brooks, and I think that one is much less controversial. So that is, generally speaking, wildly popular. It technically is like has like the ultimate case of, could this be an unreliable narrator? Because it starts with the phrase, "I am Alpharius, this is a lie." And you discover why that sentence is a lie at the end of the novel. But the truth is that that book gives a very plausible explanation of the Alpha Legion and Alpharius during the Great Crusade. Because until that book came out, we just didn't know. So, for example, the Ghost Legion, which is what the Alpha Legion around Solomon Akurra call themselves, they are called the Ghost Legion because that's what the Alpha Legion were known as before Alpharius was properly revealed. And they were called the Ghost Legion because people didn't even know if they were real. So when the Lion, for example, meets the Alpha Legion for the first time in the Great Crusade, he is doubtful a little bit that they're real, because there have always been rumors that there was a secret 20th Legion, but no one knew that was truth, and that's over the 100 years into the heresy. But the Horus Heresy books suggest actually that the Alpha Legion might have been the largest of all the legions. They were just operating in clandestine forces and small pockets across the galaxy, which is pretty cool. So that book gives a very plausible explanation of how the Emperor found Alfarius, how Alfarius served the Emperor, and in particular Malcador. We see a bit of a relationship there during the Great Crusade, and how he ends up finding Horus in the end, and how Alfarius and Omegon end up meeting each other. So that book is probably always a great place to start. Then the first book in the Heresy to read about them is the Legion, which is definitely a must-read. That starts off the kind of main Alpha Legion plotline that you see throughout the Heresy, and then starts off another plotline based around something called the Cabal and the Perpetuals, which is less good. I'll be honest, it's not, I don't know about you guys, but I didn't find it a very satisfying plotline by the end of the series. But you kind of have to read it. It'd be very difficult to understand the final fight of the Emperor versus Horus without reading that. And then once you've read that, you've got Seventh Serpent. That's a really important book to read if you want to understand the difference between Alfarius and Omegon. Praetorian of Dawn is where Deliverance Lost is a Raven Guard book, but that has like classic Alpha Legion shenanigans. Understand why everything goes wrong there with the Raven Guard. And then Praetorian of Dawn is the book that covers the death of Alfarius at the hands of Rogel Dawn. The Siege of Terra is a whole, like, starting from the book Mortis, the Alpha Legion do appear in the other books, like Servants of the Alpha Legion, but they really start making an appearance properly from Mortis onwards. Although they're not a central plotline, they're kind of going on in the background, and they only make a lot of relevance towards the end. When it gets to 40k, the big ones are, so Sons of the Hydra is a really good book. Like, people seem to really enjoy that. That gives you like a classic Alpha Legion storyline. When will Omegon return? Will Omegon return? You literally get to see the Alpha Legion destroy a Space Marine chapter. It's pretty cool. And then the Mike Brooks books. So you have Harrow Master, and then now you have Ghost Legion. But those are the main ones, I think. Oh, Shroud of Night is the other one I can think of. If I've missed any chat, mention them. James, is it confirmed that one of the twins was loyalist and one was traitor, for whatever those terms mean to the Alpha Legion? I swear the real Alfarius was loyal. So in terms of confirmed, really good question. So there's a bunch, I probably want to answer this properly with actual passages and quotes when I one day, but there's a bunch of things I can immediately think of. So the first is this story, what's the book? The Seventh Serpent, and that is a story that takes place in the Horus Heresy, where you have the idea that Alfarius and Omegon are not on the same side all of the time. So Omegon ends up helping out some of the White Scars, and Alfarius doesn't know about this, and Omegon keeps this information from Alfarius. Then, for example, you have the new book, Dropsite Massacre, which gives there's a few examples of this in the Heresy, but it's probably the most concrete example of the Alpha Legion being very direct and clear, especially their first captain, Ingo Peck, when they talk about the idea that they want the traitors to win, but they don't want them to win too much. So they sort of sabotage the traitors a little bit to make sure that some of the loyalists do survive, because they're ultimately working to the defeat of chaos, and they have a grand plan for the Emperor's long-term victory. So when Alfarius in the book Legion decides to work with the Cabal, he says that he does so saying, "I am loyal to the Emperor." So Alfarius definitely believes he's loyal to the Emperor. And then when he ends up being killed by Rogel Dawn in the book Praetorian of Dawn, he dies basically trying to have a conversation with Dawn. And he wants to get information through to Dawn about about his long-term plans and how everything is unfolding on the traitor side. But Dawn, of course, doesn't want to listen to him because Alfarius is a traitor. And then finally, there's the Siege of Terra, where in the Siege of Terra, we find out that there are all of these Alpha Legionnaires implanted under the Imperial Palace, like in the concrete. They're in stasis and they can be awakened at various points, hundreds of them. And there are a bunch of code words that can be activated to accomplish various goals. So they could be awakened to serve Horus or serve the Emperor, or ignore both and focus on chaos. And we do know that the official word sent down to awaken the Alpha Legion at that point was loyalty to the Emperor. It doesn't play out that way, but that was the official word. So it looks like after Alfarius died, him and Omegon, their souls were reunited, and Alfarius Omegon genuinely did serve the Emperor and wanted to serve the Emperor on the final day. So that's broadly speaking how things play out. But yes, I'd have to grab a bunch of actual quotes. Maybe we'll have to do that in a whole just stream someday, because it is a really good topic. Right, thank you so Owen, thank you so much for the gift of memberships. Unironically, you have 3 sides of the Alpha Legion by 3 authors: Solomon by Chaos, Occam by a Loyalist, and Cassar being a middleman, the Renegade. True, there is always going to be a different takes, and even within Solomon's Ghost Legion, there is of course different ideologies, and so he is able to he gets the Pale Spear, and so that allows him to become the new Harem Master. But realistically, not everyone is going to be aligned with him all the time. Yes, please do like the stream. Thank you so much for reminding me. I always forget to say that kind of thing. If you're new to the channel, please do subscribe and all that good stuff. It does really help out the channel. Third book will for sure end with Solomon getting knifed by Erebus right before he can bring Omegon back to the setting. Interesting. When you say bring Omegon back, do you have a theory? Do you have a theory how Omegon would be brought back? Like, would it be a ritual of some kind, or are you thinking he'll be freed, or do you think he's been working in secret the whole time? I'm curious. The ideas are cool. They certainly shouldn't be unified, but there's execution and fluff introduced in the last book as to what establishes the Legion's history that I have problems with. Interesting. So what are you thinking? I think, for example, there was some stuff I was a little bit like, that's a bit weird. Like, there was a bit where the Alpha Legion, they don't seem as comfortable defending worlds as you might think, and kind of implying that that's a new thing for the Alpha Legion. But it shouldn't be. The Alpha Legion did hold worlds during the heresy. They were a very large legion. So there was stuff like that where I don't think you need, like, the Alpha. I like the idea of them not wanting to just be Ultramarines. That's pretty cool. But I do think they should be more competent in that respect. And I think, yeah, that could have been done better. I ran out of Blood Angels books to read, so I got Dark Imperium. Dark Imperium is very solid. Definitely worth reading. Hot take, there is no Alpha Legion. It's a giant Militarum psyop. Fair enough. Who knows? They could have had their hands in many events over time, not just one big plan. I consider this book the filler episode for Solomon's story. It'll be summed up in the eventual 3rd book, so you could essentially skip Ghost Legion without missing much. If you skip this book, yeah, I guess. In terms, it's not like he's got the knowledge to save the Imperium, but Mike Brooks hasn't spelled that out yet. And, like, for example, the bit where the spear gets broken and then gets repaired, that kind of read to me like, I feel like Mike Brooks forgot to put that in the 1st book. Because basically, it works quite well, because the 1st book is based around the idea of him wanting to become the Harem Master. And in the 2nd book, he's supposed to be the Harem Master, but Mike Brooks didn't want to give him the full Pale Spear, so he doesn't have that haft. And so he's just using like a normal haft, which can get broken, and so then it gets reforged with like this kind of Xenos metal, and it's now basically indestructible. And that becomes this like symbol of office. But I don't think you needed to do it that way. I feel like you could have just done that in the 1st book, and that would have made more sense. I'm of the opinion that the Alpha Legion really doesn't know what it's doing anymore, or why it's doing the things it does. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely that aspect of the Alpha Legion in the 1st book. for sure. Whatever you think you've read, it's going to turn out to be something else. Feels like this book is starting to layer too many twists and turns to come. Yeah, I mean, this book doesn't twist too bad. Like, there wasn't too many surprises for me in this book. I think when you start a Warhammer 40k novel and it very quickly implies that this is going to be based around finding a relic, an artifact, something Xenos, you kind of know, you kind of can tell the way it's going. So I was sort of expecting a twist, and I guess the twist in theory is that Evelyn Dark, who is this rival Psycho Inquisitor who is trying to bring down Nero, the other Inquisitor. I guess that's the twist, but you sort of read her infiltration story all along. Interestingly, she is a character from another Mike Brooks book, so that's quite cool. I hope this leads to the Alpha Legion running a renegade version of the agents of the Imperium, Inquisitors, rogue traders, RBTs, assassins, etc. Yes, that would also be very easy to write as a rules thing. So, like in 30k, it's not a problem, where in Horus Heresy, you can have, or at least I don't know if it's in the new edition, but in the old edition, you could just have any Alpha Legion, any squad from any other legion in your Alpha Legion army if you picked a certain detachment. And yeah, you just use their rules, which is pretty cool and very thematic. So the idea that if you select the Alpha Legion as your detachment, or a various Alpha Legion detachment, then you're allowed to select any unit from the Agents of the Imperium book and put it in your army. That would be... I don't see why that wouldn't work. It's not even going to be very powerful because they won't synergize very well, which is pretty cool. So I really hope they do that sort of thing. And of course, the Alpha Legion having, even outside of this kind of book, of this like new alliance idea, the Alpha Legion having inquisitorial agents is a big deal. So there's a character called Katsuhiro in the Heresy, and he uncovers like Alpha Legion plots and that sort of thing. So there's always going to be large numbers of Alpha Legion agents across the galaxy, which makes sense to have various RBTs and guard squads in your CSM army. I do like Renegade Alpha Legion. It's fitting to have a non-loyalist, non-chaos segment of the Legion remnants. Yes, I think it makes more sense. I mean, if you want chaos, you got your fill of chaos, and it's not like there's no chaos in it. You know, there's a Lord Discordant in the first book. They definitely, he's got a demon in his arm. They definitely have like traditional chaos CSM elements, and he's able to utilize like Dark Age tech and like crazy stuff against the Mechanicus in the book. You've got plenty of CSM stuff that we all know and love. Do you think we will learn what escaped from the Dark Cells? Good question. Yeah, they're sort of just left open. They don't really dive into it at all. There's of course lots of theories, and people are fine to speculate. I think that, like, for example, like the classic one is what's it called? Subject 11, which is a reference that is put in like one Custodes Codex, and quite frankly, I don't think that is going to manifest into anything because it's too on the nose. Like 40k likes its conspiracies, likes its secret relics, but like weirdly, you kind of get a feel for these things, I think, once you've read enough 40k, and I don't think that's going to mean anything in the long run. I just think that was done as like a fun thing they put into a book. But I can't prove it for sure. Okay, hear me out. Alfarius has two brothers, not one. Why else would the Legion's Hydra signal have three heads? Each head represents one brother. Wake up, people. Fair enough. I mean, I don't really watch a lot of conspiracy stuff, but I've always quite liked the idea of trying to make a YouTube video in the style of like a traditional conspiracy video, and that is a great topic. Yes, it's a totally fair thing to point out. There are three heads on the Hydra sigil, and that makes a lot of sense. The main thing I can think against that idea is the fact that when Alfarius dies and Omegon kind of wakes up, it's like very vaguely talked about, but basically there's a big bright light, and then Omegon wakes up and he says, "I am alone," which basically implies to me that either he knows Alfarius is dead, but I think more likely their two souls have been reunited in one body, and now they are Alfarius Omegon. So that implies to me that at least they think there's just two of them. If there is a third, I don't know, but when they reunify, it is more in the sense of like, oh, they're whole once again. But yeah, it's definitely not impossible for there to have been a third. And yeah, I guess that is a deliberate thing that is left open. I'm working on a definitely totally 100% Blood Angels commission. It's nice. Give my boy Andy Clark a chance to write his Shroud of Night sequel. Interesting. Hey, Cordite. Third book will for sure... oh, sorry, we did that one. I don't want a big universe-changing plotline or some crazy Primarch level MacGuffin. I just want well-written characters with actual struggles. ADB Night Lords is my measuring stick. Well, I mean, if ADB Night Lords is your measuring stick, you will be disappointed. But yeah, ADB's Night Lords are just phenomenally well written, and yeah, it's just not much lands. The Black Legion is as close as you can get, I think, but yeah, they're just phenomenally compelling characters, and I think everybody likes. There's that angle of a strange sense of nobility behind a incredibly dark and monstrous exterior is just so fucking compelling. So yeah, ADB really crushed that. But hey, I mean, we might get a Decimus plotline in the future, and I mean, Games Workshop must get so many emails, so many comments. Will we ever see Decimus? So if you're not familiar, Decimus is the character that when Talos dies, his gene seed is put into one of his serfs, basically, and that becomes Decimus, who is a new Nightlord character, you know, Talos kind of living on. So yeah, people have always wanted that to be picked up. Mr. Sandman, do you think the Emperor was aware of Omegon? Great question. I think yes is the answer, because of the story. The board is set. In the story, the board is set. The Emperor and Malkador play a game of the Horus Heresy. It's like a literal game. This is when the Emperor's on the Golden Throne and they're able to communicate and play like a game psychically. And the Altharius model has 2 models. So it seems pretty likely that the Emperor knew about it. They seem to know everything, you know. They seem to know, they call that the lion, the double-edged sword, kind of implying that they know the Fallen might betray the Emperor. They know about Jagatai Khan's kind of wavering, you know, all these sorts of things they seem to be very well aware of. And yeah, it's definitely one of those books that leans into the idea, I think, a bit more of how much of this did the Emperor know or even plan? The Pillar of Dreams. At the end of the book, the Pillar of Dreams is lost, but it did give Solomon Akurra the knowledge he needed to destroy the Imperium of Man in no uncertain sense. And it very much is setting up a trilogy, as you might imagine. So I'm really interested to see how this book is felt by the community. It has got a bit of stuff that's controversial in terms of how the Alpha Legion behave, but I don't think it undoes any Alpha Legion plot lines or anything like that for you to be worried about. But this is a big narrative story for Games Workshop to push. We will likely see Alpha Legion models, probably even an Akurra model in the future. So that's something to look forward to. And at the very least, the Imperium of Man looks like a fool, and isn't that what the Alpha Legion ultimately want to achieve? Even before destroying them, you want to make them look a little bit silly. And if this new alliance is genuinely more likable than the Imperium of Man, I think that tells everybody that the Imperials just worship a corpse god on a throne. Thanks for watching this stream. If you could help me appease YouTube's machine spirit by liking and subscribing, I would greatly appreciate it. If you couldn't make the stream live but want to ask me a question anyway, consider posting it in our community tab and I'll answer it next time. To support the channel, click the join button below, which will give you access to more content, and you can drop into the members Discord where all the coolest Terrans hang out, away from the watchful eyes of the Inquisition. Thanks for joining me, and until next time, I wait for you and I forgive you. Good night.